I get a lot of questions about multi-effects stomp boxes or processors versus standalone, like independent analog pedals. It's a bit of a complicated question to answer because like many things, it's not really black and white, because there's a number of different ways we have to, I suppose, ask ourselves a questionnaire to be able to answer that question. It's not as simple as it being which one sounds better. I think if we were just looking at sound and tone alone, I would definitely say like physical pedals, like analog pedals like this, sound a lot better actually than modeling or digital pedals, no doubt. But there are times when having an analog pedal like this is not practical, and sometimes you really have to think about the working environment that you're in and what your needs are. Some people need to change through a lot of presets with pretty, I would say, advanced switches on effects of them. Stuff that wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. I would say like Broadway as an example of this, where there are times where you have you're moving pretty quick and you need to really completely create a radically different sound. That's where a multi-effects could come in, because what's more important is that you're are able to switch in a very short period of time to a completely different sound, not so much what is the absolute best sound quality that you can have. And you'll see this, you'll see performers sometimes on stage doing this too, who have to play a lot of songs and their switches within the song. They may even have them automated or have somebody else be switching those sounds, either the keyboard player or somebody backstage, switching those presets so that your sounds can change drastically. I know St. Vincent was doing this for a while to be able to navigate a lot of the tricky sound, I would say, construction work that she was doing between different sections of songs. So there is a place for them, and I think that that's where they shine the most, because they solve a major problem. Otherwise, you'd have to have an 8-foot by 8-foot pedal board and duplicates of pedals in order to be able to recall like such drastic different patches and combinations of pedals. And it's not just like the combinations of pedals, it's even the parameters on the pedals that get changed. So this is where they shine, right? I think that in that case, they work well. I think in cover bands, the thing I recommend to people when they're in cover bands, although it may seem important that a song has flange versus a chorus, or these subtle differences between modulation and different overdrives and such may seem important to you, but I feel like in most of the time in a cover band, they don't come across as well as having more of a static setup would. So I find that having one overdrive, one distortion and fuzz, and one modulation, maybe the chorus or flanger, and then maybe a tremolo if need be. Kind of feel those the same, but I often will use chorus or flange instead of a phaser, or vice versa, and a reverb and a delay. I don't have like 4 or 5 overdrives. I don't have every possible modulation effect. I try to limit it. I feel like if you live in that sound world, it actually carries more weight than if you're drastically changing sounds that are, I don't know, less than ideal. Now, this is an instance where I think the sound quality isn't going to hurt you. I think that the sound quality in general on corporate kind of gigs isn't the best anyway, because of the rooms that you're often in, and the amplification. But it just simplifies the gigs in a lot of ways too, and just, I don't know, makes it more of a whole, as opposed to like these radically different guitar sounds all the time, which in a rock setting, I often, it's a personal thing, of course, it could work for you, but I find it a little bit too jarring, and I personally would rather hear a guitar player live within a world than radically be changing. Now, if you have a big pedal board, you can do it if you like. I still prefer to work with a smaller pedal board, break it down a little bit more and have fewer options. I found that to, first of all, give me less headaches on the gigs, because I just have a few combinations to choose between, and I choose them. I also find my tone is better, and I feel like I'm developing an identity through the gig. This is also how I approach it when I do tours and I play with artists. Same thing, I usually build a sound world, and I don't have every single option. I figure out what's going to work for that, and I take what I have and I try to make it work. for that particular tour or that gig. So it's curating effects. I feel like that's, for me, I'm happiest when I hear guitar players do that, and I'm happiest when I do that. But like I said, it really depends on the scenario that you're in and the multi-effects. But if you're really in for the tone aspect of it, if the tone is the most important part of it, then the individual pedals like this retrosonic flanger, which is fully analog, is the way to go. Nothing is really going to substitute this, no matter how much they tell you it does or how close it is. And especially with fuzz pedals, because fuzz pedals, they react to your signal, and each fuzz pedal is pretty unique to itself. You can't really make them off the assembly line, at least like the really great vintage circuits, like the Tone Benders, the Fuzz Phases, right, the Maestros, any of those, like they just don't do well in mass production. So if you get a really nice one, you know, and they all, like I said, they do vary, it matters like the signal that you're giving. They're very interactive, and that is something that has not been recreated in the digital world. You may not be worried about that and working in that way, which is fine. So then you don't have to worry about it. But if you're a fan of those fuzzes, those treble boosters and those early fuzzes, then there's just no substitute. They don't, multi-processors or effects, they don't not only emulate the tone properly, but they don't react the same way. And those of you who have tried a vintage fuzz face, not like the new Dunlop reissues, but like an analog man who makes modern ones that are actually perfectly accurate, or a vintage germanium one, especially the germaniums, they react in a very unique way, and so nothing really replaces that. And in that case, there's really nothing about, there's no way to replace that. Now, I will say that one really quick before I end, one other way that people like to use multi-effects processors, if they're doing a lot of fly dates. Pedal boards could be heavy. I've got a flight case for mine, so I put mine below the plane and I fly with it. I've got a Pelican that I fly with. But so fewer and fewer people are doing that. Prices are getting high and traveling is getting harder. So some people prefer to use multi-effects, and they even use amp sims because A, they don't have to worry about backline, which is always iffy. You never know if the amp's going to work that you get, and if they're going to send the right ones that you've asked for. So that could be inconsistent alone. So some people are opting to use the fractal or something in order to just make sure that they have consistent sound every night. And even though it might not be as good of a sound, it is consistent, and that the reliability wins out in that case. So that's another way that you might want to use a multi-effects or like an amp sim fractal type situation. If you're touring, it could make that a little easier. So you really have to go through and figure out what your key points are, right, with this, what your most important, the most important elements that you need in order to be able to do the gig that you want to do and where your values are. You're not really going to have the best of both worlds, but that's okay, because obviously the situation will dictate what's best. If you're digging my channel, you can reach out to me at anatomyoftone.com. Please hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave any comments if you have them.